But we should probably move on to the next big deal that we wanted to talk about as well, and that's, of course, Diomande. I think we can come to what he means for Real Madrid and what it means for Real Madrid in a minute, Manu, but I also want to just kind of get your take on this because you have sat down and spoke to him.
Mhm.
Young man who, although he is an Ivory Coast international, spent most of his upbringing in the United States.
Mhm.
His kind of rise to the top of European football over the last kind of 12 or 18 months has just been almost unprecedented, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he moved to the States. He spent some time there at high school, and he played some lower amateur level football. And I mean, the interview is still up on Transfermarkt, right? I spoke to him.
Could we just take a minute to appreciate that? A couple
Yeah,
of years ago, this guy was playing amateur football in the United States. There'll be
he
guys
was playing high school football in the
high school
United
football. There'll be
States.
guys in the United States who probably played against him, probably sitting in
Yeah,
the pub right now thinking, I was playing football against this guy a couple of years ago, and
yeah.
now he's Real Madrid's most expensive signing of all time.
It's a wild story, isn't it? And it's very well documented on our side because um I asked Leipzig when they first signed him, hey, this is a really interesting guy where like with his background in the United States, can I sit down and interview him? And they were really great and facilitated that. And so I spoke to him in October. And that was just around the time he got his first Ivory Coast call up, and then he just he went off like a rocket from there. So if you want to have a great career in football, you need to sit down and interview with me first. I think that's the way it goes, right? But yeah, it's an incredible story. And it's also such a fascinating story because there's so many clubs that could have signed him for nothing. Really, and that again, that list is also as part of the interview. But there were a couple MLS teams, there were teams in the Premier League, and there was a team in Scotland, Stefan, that also had a look at him and said, "Nah, not for us." And then CD Leganes ultimately did do it. They did sign him, gave him a chance, and then sold him to Leipzig for 20 million euros. And as far as I understand, they're getting another big cut for this deal now because they had a sellout clause in this contract, which I think was between 10 and 20%. So there's another financial windfall coming for them. So in the region of 30 million euros is what they got for Diomande, taking a swing at a high school kid. So good for them. But the rise has been remarkable. You could see, I think, when he first arrived in the Bundesliga, that he had the potential to be way better than I think even Leipzig hoped for. I think they signed him as a potential player who they thought, okay, he's going to take 2 or 3 years and then he could be a good player. And then I think he just hit the ground running, 12 goals, nine assists, right? In 33 Bundesliga games. And I think what Real Madrid are doing here, I think they're going a little bit ahead of the trend. Fiorentino Perez made the statement that they're going to spend a lot of money on a U20 player this summer. And there was lots of speculations who it could be. And at the end of the day, it was Jan Diomande. And I think they won the race over Liverpool, who were interested, and PSG, who then made a very public statement complaining about the price of the player, which I think is fascinating considering that they have quite a really close working relationship with Leipzig over Harvey Simmons and the many transfers that they have done in the past. But they complained about the agent, etc. Real Madrid had none of these problems. Leipzig were really early on saying, we want a package of around 130 million. They ended up getting that, and it is an incredible story. But yeah, there's 3 key lessons. High school football may be better than we think. Join a club that's betting on you, and do sit down and interview with us.
Yeah, if you want to know who's going to end up being one of the most expensive players in the world in a couple of years' time, just keep an eye on who Manu interviews for Transfermarkt. That's usually a sure sign.
I mean, just in fairness, we also had Florian Wirtz before he shot off, right? So our track record isn't that.
Exactly. I think we have to kind of focus on that for a minute, though, because he is Real Madrid's most expensive signing ever, and he joins a club that need success immediately. They've now got 2 years with a trophy, which is, just almost uncalled for a club like Real Madrid. They've pushed the Jose Mourinho button, smashed the glass and pushed button for emergency. It's got Jose Mourinho's face on it. I think that's what they've gone for this summer. Um, and as we know, Mourinho doesn't wait around for young players to find their feet. You're either good enough or you're not good enough. Um, and I am really intrigued to see how Diomande does here. He obviously does have experience of playing in Spanish football, but we're talking about a player here who has moved after just 36 games at Leipzig. And it felt to me like a lot of times last season, even though he had fantastic moments of brilliance and obviously had played success at Leipzig, he also had lots of downtime. He also had some inconsistencies. He had some games where he wasn't really showing what he could do. I think he showed at the World Cup that he's a player still learning how to play a full 90 minutes at the highest level as well, which was, I felt, quite obvious against Germany for Ivory Coast. So I don't know. I do kind of feel like he's not done anything wrong. He's done everything right, and I'm sure he deserves his move to Real Madrid. But at the end of the day, Manu, Real Madrid have broke their transfer record for a player who's got 36 games to his name in top flight of European football. Um, he's the second highest. It's the second highest profit for a player for any club, based on a player joining from one season and leaving the
Mhm.
next. Only Ousmane Dembele, who left Dortmund for a profit of 113 million euros, is higher. But you look at the other players in that list. Number third is Randall Colomwani, a bit of a flop, to be honest. Enzo Fernandez, okay, he's done well at Chelsea. Nick Voldemade to Newcastle hasn't done very well. Omar Marmoush to Man City hasn't done very well. Nico Pass, okay, fair enough, he's a very good player.
Mhm.
Hugo Ekitike at Liverpool's done okay. Rasmus Højlund to Man United, a flop. And then Victor Osimhen as well. So, and he's obviously done perfectly well himself at Napoli before moving on to Turkey. But it's a mixed bag, I would say, in terms of, these players that get kind of caught up in these moments of supreme hype and then
Mhm.
go for huge transfer fees. And this by no means is a Real Madrid problem. It's something that's obviously apparent across the entire transfer window. But
Yeah.
I just wonder how much time will be given Manu and whether he'll have the time to develop into the player that he wants to be at Real Madrid.
The one name that stood out to me, and I'm just double checking his stats right here. Now, his transfer history is Ousmane Dembele.
Mm,
Um, that is a very good comparable um, in terms of how Dortmund signed him from Stade Reims, right? For relatively high transfer fee at the time, and and he just turns out to be this incredible player. Absolutely magnificent. Some of the things he did that first year with Dortmund were, it looked like PlayStation. It was, I remember it so well. It blew our minds in the same way than what Diomande did as a very young kid in his first season in the Bundesliga. The development was way faster than we thought. And Dortmund thought they would have way more time to develop him further. And then, Barcelona have to sell Neymar to PSG, have way more money than they should have had, and they go on football manager mode, and they just in their panic buy Ousmane Dembele because they needed a replacement. And obviously Dembele at the time wasn't at all Neymar. Um, that is an interesting parallel as well, because I feel like this is similar-ish in terms that Real Madrid, as you said, they hit the panic button with Jose Mourinho's face on it, and they needed a star, a young player who was really fascinating, exciting, and all that. But it took really like many years afterwards. I've been fortunate enough to see him live a few times, both at Dortmund, then at Barca, and then at PSG, where I think he's turned into this absolute machine, but a completely different player than he was when he reinvented himself to be a player that won the Ballon d'Or. But it took like 6-7 years,
mm.
right? And it wasn't until his like mid-20s, later 20s, until he had the maturity, the understanding, the work rate, and all those sort of things. And that is the risk here, that this could be like, I think there is no doubt in my mind that Diomande, his potential, his ceiling is potential Ballon d'Or winner. But he's also 18. you know, and it takes maturity, it takes understanding, it takes a coach who develops you. For the Dembele was Luis Enrique, right? Who I think is the best coach in the world. You probably agree with me. And understanding that this is the player he had, and understanding Dembele's potential, and Jose Mourinho, that's a big task now for him. He has to shepherd this career. He has to turn this diamond in the rough into a shining diamond, and find the best role for a player who, like, yeah, he's a winger, a right winger, but is that his best position? Do we know that yet? So I think that is a really important thing, that people who now watch his career and follow his career, they will see the price tag. They will not understand his age, and they will not understand that it takes time. And I just urge you, look at Dembele's career and what happened to him. And patience is going to be very, very important here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what Mourinho prioritizes is one thing, but I think if he has got if Diomande does have anything going in his favor, it's the fact that Real Madrid do have two kind of recent examples of young players who've joined the club and needed time to develop, and that is both Rodrigo and Vinicius Junior, who joined very young and developed. Eventually, were given the time to develop into top players. After a number of seasons of, will they, won't they develop into those players? They've kind of in the middle of it right now with Endrick, who, obviously went off on loan at Lyon last season, and rumors suggest he could be off to the Premier League on loan this summer. So that's maybe a bit of a different situation. I can't imagine Diomande will be sent out on loan anytime soon. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to see.